Welcome back, everyone. So let's get to pay attention to your national dailies and get to see what the papers are leading with this morning. Mr. Kerry joins us live on the program virtually. Thank you indeed, as always, for joining us here on the program. Perhaps we should begin with this. Nigeria elites with fake agency police grill DG Adeyemi, alleged forged State House documents at center of case. Well, so this is where we are now. That's the latest development. It's a developing story. So he had to allow himself to be arrested. Some would say, look, this man is a very smart man. And there were videos yesterday where he was being asked his name and over again. He said, look, I've told you my name already. But the fact that alleged forged State House documents are the center of the case, many Nigerians are still calling for the resignation, if you may, of the Chief of Staff to the President. What do you say, Mr. Kerry?
Well, I must say this is an unfortunate development. These are very serious distractions to our effort at building a country. One individual is reported to have forged all kinds of documents. But what bothers me really, the papers have, all the newspapers are reporting it for more than 2 weeks now. We have been on this same story. The two topical issues is the rescue of these kidnapped victims from Rire and in Oyo State, and then this Adeyemi man who apparently is leading all the reports and leading all the stories. For me, I think that there is much more that meets the eye with regards to this gentleman. Yesterday, the Federal High Court, issued a bench warrant for his arrest. And eventually, the Osun State Police Command picked him up where he was said to be hiding in one small location. So clearly, if his hands are so clean, why was he hiding? That is one. Two, so much has been said about, all the agencies of government, from the National Assembly to the office of the secretary, to the federal government, to the federal secretariat where he had an office, even to the point that he had an access code for the budget line where, he was almost securing a 1.3 billion naira for his office that, he's supposed to have about 300 staff. So there's so much. This is quite embarrassing. I saw the optics, the video the other day where he was where he was playing host to some foreign nationals. So if not for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I'm sure that this gentleman would have had access to 1.3 billion. Now he's pointing fingers at, at the Chief of Staff to the President. The ICPC is investigating this matter. For me, like lawyers will say, res ipsa loquitur. The facts almost speak for themselves. He has a letter of appointment purportedly signed by the Chief of Staff, Femi Gbajabiamila, who is not authorized to employ or appoint anybody. The authorizing officer for appointment after clearance with the President should be the Secretary to the federal government. The work of the ICPC is cut out, but this should not distract us so much. Ordinarily, in very serious countries, in 2-3 days, we should be done with this investigation. If the man is found guilty, then he has his day in court. But as it is, we keep dragging and making this a big issue. There are teething problems that this country is grappling with, issues of the economy, poverty, insecurity, debt of infrastructure. We are talking about roads. Of course, one other issue is even the debt of housing. The cost of housing is going up. So many Nigerians can't afford to pay their rent. So there are a whole lot of issues affecting Nigerians. This gentleman's case should almost take the backseat. 3 days, 4 days, they should be done with his investigation, and then we'll know what is happening.
Well, indeed, some would say that this gentleman couldn't have had such access, such participation in government at that level without some insider assistance. And so perhaps it's just as important as other national issues. If indeed he has had access to using taxpayers' funds, to carry out government action, it's an important, part of national conversation. Let's go to other important aspects of national conversation this morning, and it gets what gets our attention is the Guardian newspaper, and it focuses on what affects everyone's pocket. Fuel jumps by 100 naira per litre as Dangote shifts $1.84 billion FX burden to marketers. And of course, the story came through yesterday, citing a review of, the arrangement with the federal government on Forex for Naira for crude. And, that has now led to the pricing of crude and petrol in dollars by Dangote refineries. What are your thoughts on this? Does it make the management of petroleum industry, particularly the downstream aspect, more cumbersome, and the consumers, of course, inevitably carrying the burden of, this dynamics in petroleum management? Mr. Akiria.
Well, very clearly, the issues are very, it's obvious to everyone. If not for Dangote Petroleum Company, by now Nigerians will be having a very hectic period. We'll be suffering more as Nigerians. You can imagine before Dangote came on stream, there were queues everywhere. But with the advent of Dangote, now we have access to fuel, good quality fuel, and then the federal government promised that, perhaps to cushion the effect of, the removal of fuel subsidy, they struck a deal with Dangote Petroleum for this crude to Naira to crude swap. But how has that fared? Clearly, it has not worked. It appears that agreement has collapsed, particularly against the background of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, the war between the United States and Iran. It's been a topsy-turvy affair between the two countries. And that narrow strip of waterway that is supposed to be an international passageway for cargo, has been a very contentious issue since in the last 2 months, and it's been a big problem for us in Nigeria. Anything that happens at the international level, Nigerians always bear the brunt of it. So it always appears as if the government is not prepared for anything, whether it is coronavirus, where if it is electricity, now it is fuel. We got fuel, we remove subsidy on fuel, and look at what has been happening. So for me, nobody can blame Dangote. Dangote is a businessman. He secured his operational funds from the international financial system. I do not know, I'm not a spokesman, I don't work for Dangote. Nobody knows at this point if he has been able to liquidate his loan. So he cannot. Dangote Petroleum was not opened as a charity organization to provide fuel free or maybe subsidized fuel for Nigerians. It is the responsibility of government to work that out with Dangote. Other countries are doing that. Ghana, Tanzania, and other countries are working out a fair arrangement for Dangote, to supply finished products to them. I think at this point, it is now a fundamental duty of government to work out a proper arrangement to cushion the emerging effect as a result of, the increased pump price of fuel. 100 naira, if you look at that, it is a lot. Already, we're buying for about 1,250 to 300. So as it is now, the price has gone up to about 1,400, 1,450. If it continues at this rate, I doubt if ordinary Nigerians can cope. So this is a big challenge. As I said earlier, there are issues confronting Nigerians, and this is pushing more people into the poverty noose, and the government has a responsibility to intervene very quickly.
Yeah, Mr. Carrier. So, in fact, one of the things that crossed my mind is what Bukola always advocates for. Whenever there is an upswing in the price, we see the corresponding increment across export depot price, and then gets down to the consumption point, which is at the petrol station. Now, when there's a downswing, we don't see that level of commensurate decrease. So from Monday, that upswing has been maintained in excess of about 10%. So we're revolving around 77 at the close of day, say on Friday. By now, we're talking about $85 per barrel. So it's a deregulated market. We hope the government can use fiscal measure to help us. But let's look at the Vanguard. Two stories I would like you to speak to. literally sports for choice. One is above the nameplate, one is beneath the nameplate. I'm not sure whether they've arrived yet, but the one beneath beneath the picture, I should say, the South African returnees recount ordeals. 315 Nigerians return today in final evacuation from the Republic of South Africa. That's according to the federal government's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'd like you to speak to that as well. But then the one above the nameplate is of interest, which is a page 30 read, and this is credited to the SGF, says, why Tinubu didn't call Makinde over Orire rescue? What do you make of the two stories?
Well, I'll start with the last one. There have been a whole lot of issues between the government and the governor of Oyo State, Sheyi Makinde. Makinde is calling on the international, the United Nations to intervene by conducting an independent investigation. Well, for me, I've seen the pushback, the whole lot of attacks on the governor by, well, I would say the presidency. Now, the issue, if we put it in perspective, Nigeria is part of the international system. Nigeria is a member of the United Nations. And so if any component unit of the Federal Republic, states, the subnationals, are not satisfied with the way the federal government is handling the internal issues here, what are the options left for a state? So for me, I do not think that the governor of Oyo State has gone overboard to ask the United Nations to conduct inquiries into what really happened with the abduction. There are a whole lot of gaps. There are a whole lot of loopholes in what Nigerians are being told. First and foremost, I give it to our security agencies, the police, the army, the DSS, Security and Civil Defense Corps, and of course, hunters and vigilantes. They did so very well to get these abductees out. But be that as it may, what are the issues here? These individuals were kidnapped from school wearing uniforms. Now they appeared with civilian clothes. Nobody has explained that. The government says that in the course of freeing them, 8 of the terrorists were killed and some were arrested. Nobody has seen the visuals, the video of those arrested and those killed. And so the gaps are there. I do not know why, in coming out with public statements by the presidency, I know a lot of experienced people who are handling who handle public information for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. For example, Bayo Nanuga was my former boss at the News Tempo PM News. He's a very experienced journalist. He's one of the leading lights in the media. But I wonder, since he got into the presidency, the kind of statements that he issues always fall short of public expectation. For example, the issues I've raised, I would have expected that these statements will answer some of these questions. Because when you leave loopholes, when you leave gaps, then you also leave people in doubt about the authenticity of the statement, of the information you're giving out. So those are the issues. So I think the governor of Oyo State, in my view, is not satisfied with what has played out, and he has called on the UN to conduct an independent inquiry. If the government has nothing to hide, I do not think that we should have this kind of pushback. If that is what Sheyi Makinde wants, so be it. Now, with regards to the second issue about, I think I've missed that out now. Please kindly just refresh my memory. Raise the second leg of the question.
Yeah, the ones that are returning from South Africa, the evacuation, the final phase of the evacuation, yeah.
Oh yes. You see, I've said it severally that, yes, what the South African government has done is an eye-opener for the rest of the continent. They are simply telling other African countries that, look, they want to run their country as an island, that they do not care that nationals who enter their country should leave. Now, the report also showed that even properly documented migrants, they did not renew their papers, so they became affected. I have always said that we need to build Nigeria. We need to build our country. Nigeria is a global power. I'm not even thinking that this country, it is not my argument that Nigeria is a continental power. We have the resources, we have the manpower. I think the problem we have, the challenge we have is that of leadership, that can aggregate all the resources we have in this country, our unique selling point, aggregate them to the advantage of Nigerians and the international community, such that we can be respected. We don't have a national carrier, if not for air peace. What are we going to do? How do we get these stranded Nigerians out of South Africa? We don't have a national carrier. We don't have a national shipping line. So these are issues that other countries have dealt with, and that has placed them, as fair competitors at the international level. So governors and government must look at these issues, and address them. Now, with regards to the returnees, well, they just have to rebuild their life. That is what it is. Many Nigerians are out there. South Africa has told us, has slapped us in the face, rather than gloating over what the South Africans have done. Because today too, they are feeling the pinch, because I'm seeing visuals and videos of empty streets, empty business districts in South Africa. With time, in the next 1, 2, 3 months, the South African government is also going to feel the pinch, because Nigeria and South Africa are head to head in terms of the leading economy in the continent. So as it is with this development, if the South African government is unable to address the economic shortfall and the imbalance, then you can see that they will have a very serious economic impact. Nigeria should capitalize on this, provide for the returnees, give them a startup pack for those that are in businesses. I think they can be integrated fully back into our society by the government, giving them some kind of soft loans with regards to the business that they were doing before, and so that they can rebuild their lives back home here. That is, for me, that is the way to go. But this is a wake-up call for the country. The so-called Africa, the centerpiece of our foreign policy, we must jettison that. If you consider that against the backdrop of insecurity, where we open our borders, looking at the ECOWAS protocol on free movement of persons and goods, we need to suspend that, so that we block our borders and deal with insecurity that is affecting this country. The idea of playing the big brother to African neighbors, I think that it is time to review that, to go back and review those policies and see where it is hurting us, and do the right thing for our country. Now, most countries are placing their national interest first. Look at the United States. Say America first before anybody. Look at what ICE, Immigration, Customs and Enforcement, is doing in the United States. Repatriating immigrants from the U.S. Nigeria, when are we going to also repatriate immigrants? The countries are washed with so many Africans, foreigners, Chinese, Asians, everywhere without documents. And then we allow them, to have a free day in our country. We have to be very serious as a country if we want to, compete within the international system.
I mean, I couldn't have agreed less with you, Mr. Akerha, because indeed, there are even foreigners who have businesses here where there are stories and reports of the inhumane treatment meted upon Nigerians who work in those in those organizations. So I totally agree with you. I think we have to fix our house, as some would say. But let's take a look at the Nigerian Tribune this morning. It leads with something around insecurity. It says, go after other bandits, terrorists nationwide. Senate tells FG. Go after other bandits, terrorists nationwide. Senate tells FG. Cautions Makinde to stop trivializing government's efforts. Or your assembly backs governor on call for UN probe. Orire Hospital discharges 25 out of 39 on admission. What exactly do you think is playing out here, by the way, between the Oyo State's governor and the government at the center?
Well, I said it earlier, the governor of Oyo State is not satisfied with, because if you look at when he visited Bauchi State, the governor said a day after he declared his interest for the presidency, the following day at 9 a.m., these abductions took place. So he's suspecting foul play in the whole, encounter. What has happened, what played out in the 3 schools that were attacked. Well, the Oyo State is a component of the federating unit in Nigeria. Ordinarily, we are running a federal system. The government of Oyo State has the right, to run the affairs of the state as it wishes, if it does not breach, federal rules and regulations. The Senate pushing back on the governor of Oyo State is also understandable. Sheyi Makinde is not a member of the APC, and so the Senate is dominated by the ruling APC. So you cannot expect less. The pushback is coming from both the presidency and the Senate. But as I said earlier, for me, I do not see anything wrong with it. It is one thing to make a call on the United Nations, and it's another thing for the United Nations to act. Nigeria's permanent representative to the UN, Jimoh Ibrahim, I read his statement yesterday where he dismissed the Oyo State governor and said that, you know, the UN does not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. Well, I also fought, for me, I also faulted the statement by Jimoh Ibrahim. The UN does interfere. If the UN does not interfere, why do we have them interfering in our security? Why is Nigeria calling on other countries for partnership? You know, asking them to intervene and assist the country. You know, well, if there is genocide, with what has happened in Plateau State, Benue State, and all that, where the Christian Association of Nigeria, you know, has alleged genocide, and the US and the UN issued a statement calling on the government of Nigeria to do something urgent to address the issues. So these are interventions in different forms. So Nigeria is not an isolated country, it's not an island unto itself. As I said earlier, it's a member of the international system, United Nations. And so whatever happens here has a direct impact on at the global level. So be that as it may, that is just what it is. The Senate, yes, they've made their call. It is another thing for the UN to review what is playing out in Nigeria and take a stand. But as it is also part of the exercise of the independence of the subnationals in a federative unit. When the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was governor of Lagos State, he pushed back on then President Olusegun Obasanjo with regard to the creation of more local governments. I think he created 27 development areas, which he wanted to transit to local government areas. And then President Olusegun Obasanjo didn't approve, but Governor Tinubu at the time, as he was then, you know, insisted that those development areas would run, and they still ran. You know, I saw there was a lot of pushback at the time, even on the political front. When Obasanjo tried to take over the Alliance for Democracy, he had a meeting with them. All governors in the Southwest, you know, fell into the trap. It was only Tinubu that escaped it. So that is an assertion of the independence of the subnational components of the country. Yeah, so in my view, Seyi Makinde has not heard so much, and it's like calling a dog a bad name to hang it. I have also said that as a journalist, I've seen loopholes in this public statement that was issued by government. For example, between what time did the abductees change into civilian clothes? They were looking quite shabby when they were released, apart from Mrs. Alamu, who looked very traumatized. And of course, the 8 terrorists that were killed, nobody saw them. Those that were arrested, we've not heard from them. There is no interview. If it were to be in the US and some other societies, even the operation itself would have been captured, you know, live. And then, of course, those arrested, you will see them on television. Those who attacked, the individual that attacked President Donald Trump, who fired gunshots at him. We saw what happened. The gentleman was arrested and paraded. That is how to run a transparent system, devoid of, you know, public sentiment. So I think the government needs to do more. The actions of government must be open, must be transparent, so that to shut the door against some of these criticisms that are coming out.
Well, spot on there, Mr. Akerha. I mean, I like that idea, the live transmission of such operations. I remember when Osama bin Laden, I think, was killed, and it was live on TV around the world, and, you know, we saw the US display a lot of professionalism there at its best. So we want to see, I mean, I also agree with those points you have made. But must anchor at this point, thank you indeed, as always. Mr. Igwe Akerha is a member, Nigerian Guild of Editors. Thank you indeed for your time on the program.
It's always a pleasure, Kelly, and the rest of the team. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, Mr. Akerha has raised some really pertinent questions around the Orire abduction and, of course, eventual or subsequent rescue. And we have someone here who will provide us some of what perhaps played out behind the scene. The DSS that was speaking to us this morning about that particular rescue operation, because it was the DSS who provided, according to reports, the intelligence that was used for that particular operation. This is the Morning Brief. We're back in just a moment. Please stay with us.